Hello, and welcome back to Shatter Our Souls. And today we have the 10th episode or 10th video within the Metroid Mondays. So, given the circumstances, I know I've only got 3 bosses left in the game. Those being the Omega Pirate, Ridley, and the finale of the Metroid Prime. So, I figured, given that I feel as though at least 2 to 3 of those are going to absolutely wreck me, I'm going to go and do a little bit of power-up hunting, if you will. So, welcome to the first round of the artifact hunt. And it kind of came to my attention while I was planning this that each of the artifacts has a little bit more of a role within the society of the Chozo, to some degree. Each of them has something to do with them, at least as far as what we would consider the 12 commandments of Christianity. That being sources of knowledge and wisdom. Now, knowing how the structure of the Chozo system was, so to speak, in the early days, that being the whatchamacallit, their caste system divided along lines of their species, so to speak. Oh, I didn't know those things could survive in water. Learn something every day. Um, they have 2 distinct sects, sects, of Chozo in general. The first is the Makin. The Malkin are the warriors, the battlers, the fighters. They are close. They are the strength of their military. They are the ones who shoot first, ask questions later. The other are the Toha. The Toha are the thinkers. They are the scientists. They are the brains of the operation, more than anything. And so, going through this, I questioned a little bit as to why there's this divide between them. Now, it can be reasoned that the majority of the Chozo on Talon 4 here are probably of Toha a origin, at least as far as their speciation goes. The fact that they were able to receive enlightenment that effectively allowed them to transcend death and transcend the mortal coil in general speaks, I think, very highly to their capabilities and their spirituality. Which brings me into the 12 artifacts. 12 ideals, 12 treasures, held near and dear by the Chozo, that were meant to hold back what was effectively a plague, the poison that threatened their land as a whole. Now, in no particular order, we have the artifact of strength, elder, truth, newborn, wild, life giver, warrior, Chozo, nature, sun, world, and spirit. And so, with each of these artifacts, I believe comes a value or a certain mentality that the Chozo bring with them. The artifact of Chozo is probably the easiest to explain. That's their species. All in all, whether they're Makin, Toha, whether they're old or young, didn't matter. They were Chozo and needed to be respected and treated as fellow Chozo. And thus brings me to that mentality of it potentially being their version of the 10 Commandments or whatnot. The artifact of newborn is their cycle of life, or elder and newborn specifically show their cycle of life. You're a newborn, you grow old, you become an elder, a warrior, a thinker, something. Effectively, what this is aiming to represent is both their life cycle, but also their value in their society for both the young, the old, you name it. Because the Toha were also very spiritual, they have the artifacts of nature, the artifact of world, and the artifact of wild. Now, these three, I admit, I would more or less tie into one another. That ideology of having this untouched world, this untouched potential, being the artifact of wild, the planet as it is in its natural state. But they also respect the planet that they live on, the artifact of world, to a point that they are trying their best with every piece of technology that they have to save the planet that they're on. The artifact of sun is also incredibly important. It's similar to the other nature-based artifacts, has a mentality around this habitable planet. They respect that the fact that their sun is, in fact, helping them with maintaining equilibrium, with the vegetation, with maintaining life in general. Where we start getting into some of the more questionable ones: truth, elder, warrior, and strength. Well, and spirit. If we look at these ones lean more heavily into the divide between the Toha and the Makin sides of the equation. The artifact of Elder often brings with it truth. The more knowledgeable an individual is, the older they typically are, the more likely that they are going to be able to understand the true nature of things in general. And I think it's a fair assumption or statement to make to state that the Chozo had much more going for them in that regard. The artifact of truth is also, or would also directly be affected by the fact that they are dealing with external awareness. The capability to see the future is in part, I believe, part of what they're looking at with the artifact of truth. Something that truly affects their well-being. At least that's my understanding of it. The artifact of strength. Well, that could mean a couple of things. It could be a direct reference to the the Makin side of the equation, as they are the warriors. They're the ones that lead the charge and are responsible for what would be the strength or military might of the Chozo. But looking a little bit further than that, we also have the artifact of warrior. At first, strength and warrior kind of meld together. However, I believe that warrior is more so referring to Samus. Samus is, well, a warrior wielding Chozo armor, wielding their technology, and was foretold in their visions to be an individual who would save the planet, bring back the nature, bring back what this planet once was, even in their loss. And so, where I think this whole situation kind of ties back into itself is the artifact of spirit. Now, we know outright that the Chozo ghosts are a fairly commonplace entity, especially in the late game. It would not be a stretch to assume that they're referring to themselves, the Chozo ghosts, as spirits within this portion of the game. And so, where you end up with is effectively their spiritual and cultural standards all being tied back into one another through these artifacts. While there is nothing log-wise that tells us more about it, that's kind of where we're at. Anywho, we're already 10-ish minutes into the video, and I was expecting that to last a heck of a lot longer than it did. So, we are currently aiming for the final required upgrade of the game, the plasma beam. Now, this section is not doable the way I do it with the original GameCube tank controls, because to be able to jump with those controls meant that you had to always drop a morph ball bomb. Currently, there's nothing of the sort that I have to worry about on this, which I think is a little bit of an oddball statement or situation. That being said, I do enjoy messing around, especially with this particular, I don't want to call it a puzzle, but this particular magnet ball track, or spider ball track. And the weapon that ties everything back in. Samus's true, most powerful beam weapon in Prime 1, the plasma beam. So, we now have the plasma beam. Where to next? Personally, I'm kind of the mindset that I've already got the artifact from both of the artifacts that are in Magmoor Caverns. I know that there are at least 2 in the Phazon Mines. I know that there is at least 2 in the Chozo Ruins. 2 left in the Chozo Ruins, sorry. So at this moment, it's gonna be a little bit of a wander back. Oh, there's also at least 1 more on the Talon Overworld. Or in the Talon Overworld, I should say. So, we're gonna go this way, see what's on the other side, and if it's not the right direction, we'll turn around and figure out what we're doing. I am not going back to the mines yet. Nope. So, Phendrana Drifts has 3, actually. The first that I'm going to be aiming for is on Phendrana's Edge. On the, I believe it's within the glacier, past the point of having battled Thardus. Now, I had a little bit of a conversation with somebody the other day, and the question was brought up of, would Samus be able to fight all the bosses in Metroid Prime at the same time? And while the idea intrigued me as Samus's absolute strongest, maybe. But I don't think she could do it. And it's not to say that I don't think Samus is potent and powerful. Far from that argument. However, the problem arises very early on in this situation that a lot of the early game bosses, she would absolutely decimate. The Hive Mecha, the Hive Mecha, Parasite Queen, the Incinerator Drone, Flagra, the Sheegoth Queen, the Queen of the Sheogoth, we have Thardis. And I think that's as far as she would get in a straight one-to-one fashion, for everybody against her fashion. It's not to say that she couldn't handle it. Rather, after that point in the game, the enemies get so much more potent that it would be difficult for Samus to be able to divide and conquer. And I've said it in the past, and I will kind of use this statement again. The only way you can defeat Samus at the end of the game is with overwhelming force or an equal. In this particular case, overwhelming force would win. Now, I believe that Samus does have a chance if each of the boss, or would manage it if all the bosses were simply in sequence, kind of like a video game boss rush. I don't believe that anything could actually stop her in that circumstance. But the issue is it's not. If it was everybody at once, she really wouldn't be able to handle herself. Unless she also had the Phazon Beam. Now, I don't necessarily count Samus's strongest version as having the Phazon Beam. And part of that is because it's something that can't be replicated beyond the battle that it is within. The Metroid Prime provides a pool of liquid Phazon that is absorbed into the suit and discharged through the cannon. Fair enough. If Samus was able to harness this consistently, there would be absolutely no doubt in my mind that she would be able to defeat most of her opponents without any issues, leaving probably the final three, that being Ridley, the Omega Pirate, and Ridley, the Omega Pirate, and the Metroid Prime, to battle her simultaneously. And I think the Metroid Prime would be the easiest of those three, ironically. Part of the problem is that it's the Metroid Prime's only weakness. And assuming that... Okay, there's a door back there. I just need to power bomb it. I don't have a power bomb. Shoot. Actually, I think there might be a... Yeah, there's a power bomb upgrade in the area just back over here, I think. Anyways. Because the Metroid Prime's only weakness is effectively what it itself is and can control, it would stand to reason that the other creatures and beings that are not as familiar with it would be weaker to it. Especially with the raw destructive power that Phazon provides. So, where does that leave us? If Samus, in Prime 1, specifically Prime 1, had access to the Hyper Beam or the Phazon Beam used in the final battle against the Metroid Prime, then I believe she would win. If that one weapon is not accessible, I believe that she could handle virtually everything up until the final three. I don't think that's a crazy place to put myself, or put my opinion. It's not really right in the middle, but it is somewhere that shows Samus's strength. Because Thardis is really the only one that has both the mobility and the defensive capability to deal a whole lot of damage to Samus among those early game bosses. Maybe the Omega could also fit in there if we're talking a sequential order, but I feel like the Omega Pirate would actually end up helping Samus accidentally. And that's kind of a little bit of a question mark as well. Who knows? Theoretically speaking, I could see it going It'll be a very, very tough battle. One that I don't believe every version of Samus would be able to come out on top with. But it would be a very interesting and unique approach to things. And given how aggressive the creatures are in Metroid Prime, I can definitely see it having some far-reaching consequences. Ah, right. I forgot it's dark in here. So, with all of that in mind, we are heading up now towards the tower at the top of the research facility. This one requires the plasma beam to be able to access, due to having to melt ice off of a open windscreen or something. It's never 100% clear whether there was supposed to be glass or not, and then blow up a massive chunk of the tower to cause an implosion. Now, likely, based on the research that I've been able to gather, it is likely one of a few of the artifacts that the space pirates were able to get under their control. Now, that sounds kind of strange, but hear me out. In the logs for the space pirates, it is specifically mentioned that they have, or that they were aiming to get into the impact crater to harvest the most potent sources of Phazon that they could get close to. And I think that's a pretty fair statement. Trying to get after that would be beneficial to them. However, because they did not have access to all 12 and could not decipher the language of the Chozo properly, they were left wandering the planet looking for the various artifacts. This meant that some, like the ones that are found in the Phazon mine underneath their, what is it, the Alpha Pirate or something? It was, the smaller one near the beginning that has the blue armor, but none of the mechanical upgrades that the other elite pirates do. I believe that one is under the control of the pirates and that they knew it was there, and that Samus, or whomever, if they wanted to collect it, would end up having to effectively go through their defense system to be able to access it. Theory. But that's kind of what we're at. The artifact that we got on Phendrana's Edge had a lot of technology of the pirates around it, which, in my opinion, suggests that they had control of that one as well. But the two in Magmoor Caverns, for example, were not under pirate control because one of them was literally inside a block of rock. At least, that's my understanding. Hey, we're knocking down the tower. I admit I love how much damage that Samus can do. Although, admittedly, that's a little lackluster for something as large as it was. I think that it would have been slightly more catastrophic. Like that. Most if not all of the artifacts in the Chozo ruins are likely under the control of the Chozo ghosts. Same with the ones in the Talon overworld. However, that's about where it ends in that regard. We are now heading back towards the entrance, the first visitation of this area. Now, the reason being is because the temple that we had to go through to get to the Queen Shegoth ends up housing another one of our artifacts. And that just won't do. So we're going to take a little bit of a wander that direction, and ugh, darn doors affected only by electricity. So we have no electricity in the building, but somehow they have the what is it called? The celestial telescope or whatnot active at the moment? Seems a little far-fetched to me. Oh, that's potent. Okay. The plasma beam might do a little bit more than I had initially expected, and I've been overestimating it for the duration of the challenge. So, yeah. Good things? I hope. Anywho, we're gonna pop our way through this little minefield here. Ugh. I'm sorry, Thomas. And I'm sorry, Johnny. Jeffrey. Okay. Tony, don't follow me, please. Tony, don't make that mistake. Thank you. Tony almost made that mistake. So, I'm curious, what are your guys' opinion on the artifacts themselves? My interpretation of it could be very wrong, and I'll be honest, it's an interpretation. None of what I've said regarding it is to be treated as fact. Only to be treated as a theory at best, or a possible explanation as to why. Anywho, I'm not liking the idea of getting caught off guard and ending up roasty toasty. So I'm going to quickly save here, and then we're going to continue the escapade. Well, that was fast. Anywho, now that we are sorted, is there anything that you feel I've missed in talking about this game? I'm genuinely curious because, truthfully, I think that Metroid Prime is a fantastic game. It's one that has so much room for conversation around game design. It has room for conversation around world building. It has room for conversation around speciation, around human intervention. There's so much more that we could technically gain from looking at this game than what lies on the surface. And this might just be me over hyping this game. That is a possibility. But I don't think it's too far-fetched to say it like that. I will say that despite it being a absolute gem of a game, it does have its flaws. And it's a real shame to have to say it, but nothing truly great is without the possibility of being scrutinized or is above scrutiny. Everything has room for actually looking at it from a different point of view. So, starting with something simplistic, the combat. Metroid Prime has a combat system that is very similar to pick your weapon and off you go. It doesn't have a very robust or complex system set up. And I think partially that's intentional. If you look at the control scheme for the original game, the control scheme was, while somewhat revolutionary of the time, is very dated by today's standards. They didn't fully grasp the concepts that they were trying to put forward initially. Note that playing under a different control scheme can very well at this point not feel like Metroid. But looking at that, they had to adapt the gameplay, at least in some capacity, to match the controls that they were expecting the players to be able to use. People weren't able to aim at the same time as moving in the original version of the game. Or at least not to my understanding of the situation. Because the plus pad on the GameCube controller controlled I believe it was the visors, and the C-stick controlled the weapons. Correct me if I'm wrong, I've never played the original. But if that's the case, then they had to find other ways around typical problems that arose from it. Thus, the combat, while enemies are more aggressive, is more about movement. It's more about avoidance. And they added that lock-on feature, partially due to the experiences shared by those who played the Nintendo 64's Zelda, simply so that there was going to be a way to keep the player's view and, how do I put it nicely? In order to keep the players prepared and actually attentive or aware of their enemy position, serving a dual focus of being able to get around and avoid enemy attacks at the same time. The other major issue, and it is one that was brought up to me earlier, that it is hard to get around, is the end game artifact hunt. Now, I'm realizing that I am one of very few who enjoy that. I like the idea of being able to see the world once more from the lens of the individual in power. It is a moment that shows how far you've come, because the areas that you experienced earlier are now at your mercy, effectively. There was nothing holding you back from what you needed to accomplish by the time you do that endgame quest. But a lot of games of that era, like Legend of Zelda Wind Waker, had a similar fetch quest. And it was partially because it was believed in that generation of games that they had to be longer, that they had to get more content out of it. So rather than make endless content, they had the players search out MacGuffins. So I have come to a different respect of this particular fetch quest. I don't know. Let me know what you think of it in the comments if you want. But we're rounding out to the end, so if you like the video, subscribe to the page, and have a good one.